Hello and welcome back to the Knitting Page channel. If you're new here, my name's Paige and I'm the face behind the Knitting Page. Today I have a regular podcast episode for you, and this is podcast episode number 32. So let's get into it. In classic podcaster style, I am wearing my finished objects, and you can only see one of them, which is my Matcha sweater by Knits for Days. And this has been a sweater that's been in heavy rotation since casting it off. This is a top-down raglan with some 2x2 detailing in the collar, on the raglan, and in the cuffs and the hem of the sweater. I knit this using Woolstock Light in their fingering weight yarn, held together with brushed alpaca silk by Drops for the blue, and with a burgundy sock yarn that I picked up in Montreal, also held with brushed alpaca silk. And now the pattern didn't call for stripes, but this blue and burgundy color has been all the rage for me this fall, and I looked in my stash and this was the yarn that I had. I just had to go and buy some blue brushed alpaca silk, and so I thought, let's make this a reality and cast it on. I found knitting the stripes super addicting because I did 4 stripes for the blue and 4 stripes. I did 4 rows for the blue and 2 rows for the burgundy for some like pencil-esque stripes. It's kind of giving Frankie sweater by Petite Knit, but obviously it's a different construction and different style of yarn. Now the one thing with the sweater is it did grow a lot with blocking, and I think also just knitting in the round. Knits for Days, I think, is an extremely tight knitter. So if you knit one of her patterns, if you are a regular knitter, I would suggest sizing down. They're still incredible, they're still beautiful, but both pieces I've knit have wound up growing with blocking, which I honestly haven't really minded. But this sweater, let me just double check the gauge. So this sweater is supposed to be a 21 stitch gauge, but mine grew to 16 stitches after blocking for a really nice oversized look. The other thing about this sweater is there are no decreases in the sleeves, so they are really billowy, which I personally love. I think they're fun to I like the wide look of them, and they're also fun to use as mittens. But if I'm doing dishes or cooking, I just wind up rolling them, and I find the sweater to be a little more functional for if there's a risk of getting your sleeves into something. I will just roll them up and have it be this little 3/4 sleeve moment. This sweater was also incredibly quick to knit up. The recommended pattern is for it to be on 5mm needles, but I went down to 4.5mm needles to knit it. I'd probably go down even to a 4mm needle if I were to reknit it and try to get my size, but I'm really pleased with the oversized look of it. I've gotten so many compliments on it when I've worn it to work or out and about, and it's definitely a sweater where people go, whoa, you knit that? Even though it's not overtly complicated, I think because of the simplicity and the cleanness and the stripes, it just looks really polished. Now, in the back, as you can see, I do have maybe some slight noticing of where I carried my yarn, and I did the technique described in the normal sweater where you slip 1 stitch purlwise of the previous color you're knitting and then knit a row and keep repeating that. So like there's 1 stretch stitch, so you're attempting to do the jogless stripes, but it's still always a tiny bit noticeable. The blocking really did have it settled down, and that it is kind of difficult to tell now that it's done. There's also some short row shaping in the back of the sweater, so the back does sit a little higher up than the front. I made sure to start the stripes after I finished my short row so that there wasn't any complications in what stripe goes where. But overall, I would highly recommend knitting this sweater, and it's one that I am so pleased to have in my wardrobe, and it definitely makes me want to knit another striped sweater in the future. Now, I did say that I was wearing 2 finished objects. The other one is skirt number 1. Skirt number 1 is a skirt by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I knit mine using Heritage and a silk mohair from a yarn shop in Montreal in this lovely navy color. I knit the size medium, which is larger than my recommended size. And I honestly wish I knit the size small, but I was really worried about this being see-through or like being like stretched around my butt. And it is definitely not. It grew also a lot with blocking. And as I was knitting it, Mr. Running was like, that looks very large. The one saving grace with skirt number 1 is there is an elastic band in it. And so I was able to cinch the waistband in a bit, but the rest of the skirt does still flow out a lot. Now, this skirt was incredibly quick to knit. And as you can see, it does have an A-line shape. So you do increases for the shaping of the sweater, You do increases for the shaping of the skirt so that it does flare out at the bottom. You also do a special cast off, a no roll edge cast off, so that your stockinette edge doesn't roll up as you're wearing it. So it recommends to sew in your skirt band, like your waistband, as you knit, but I did mine after I finished the skirt. And so I have a couple here over on a safety pin here. And you can see my white band that I sewed in. I'll probably go back and sew these down, but I wanted to get some wear in the skirt before I fully committed to the size of the waistband in case I had to make it a little looser or a little tighter to get the fit that I want. I also did the length for the medium, but as a relatively short person, I probably could have gotten away with a repeat or 2 less so that it is a little bit shorter. But overall, it's a great work skirt. Like, it's an appropriate length. It's not too tight, but I think if it was my preferred style of skirt, it would be a little tighter and a little shorter. It's just what I tend to prefer. But most of the skirts I wear are usually skirts, not an actual skirt. It's knit on 5.5 millimeter needles for the majority of the skirt, so it does work up incredibly quick. And the mix of heritage and mohair just meant for a really robust yarn, as well as a really budget-friendly garment for all things considered. Heritage, again, in Canada goes for less than $8 a skein, and I used just under 2 balls of heritage and under 50 grams of mohair. Of course, you could omit the mohair to make it an even more budget-friendly skirt, but I had the navy mohair on hand, and you know me, I love my navy, so I thought that this would be a good addition to my knit wardrobe. I really would like to knit a matching sweater to it. My only caveat is that I don't have the exact match of mohair, so I'm curious if a mohair-less sweater would pair well with it, or if I should find a mohair mate, or if this skirt is just not going to be a full matching set ever, and I just go for something a little more high contrast than going for a matching navy top or cardigan. Those are my 2 finished objects for this week. I'm very pleased that I finished both. My Matcha sweater was not on my plans for this fall, but my skirt number 1 was, and I'm glad to have gotten that off my needles. Let's get on to my works in progress. So my first work in progress is one that I talked about casting on in my last podcast with Holly, and it's one that you may have seen if you watched my winter knitting plans, but this is the Chameleon sweater by Atelier Castin. This sweater is one that is a test knit, and so I'm really trying to get it off my needles. I'm a little behind in the deadline, but I communicated with the designer, and the goal is to get it done this week, which I think is very doable. I have 1 more row of the collar to go before I sew it down, and then I just have my sleeves, and this has been less than a week's knitting all in all. And I'm honestly very chuffed with the purple color, and I'm borrowing chuffed from Holly, but I really think it is a beautiful sweater, and I think it's going to be really nice to wear to work. It's funny, I tried it on the other night after I finished the body, and Mr. Running was obsessed with the color. And the other really nice detail about this, so it has a little decorative braid detail over here, which was a really fun detail to add, and I think it just makes the sweater look really clean and sharp. The sweater also has an insane amount of shaping, and so it feels like when I tried it on, it just felt like it fit so nicely because Atelier Castin goes to so much detail and adds so much shaping in every single one of her patterns that I've made, which is the third Atelier Castin pattern that I've made. The other thing I really like about the shaping is I find that it makes the yoke go by super quickly because you're always on to the next step or the next section, and you're never doing a raglan increase for like 15, 20 rows. You're like doing 7 rows, maybe at the most, while doing the shaping. I also chose to knit the size 3, which is a size up than what I would recommended to do based on the amount of ease, but I wanted this to be a little more positive. I'm also holding a mohair with it, and sometimes I find a mohair can be a little bit sensitive depending on the mohair. I'm using Knitting for Olive silk mohair in this sweater in the colorway Unicorn Purple, along with a sock yarn from the Knitting Loft in the colorway La Ti Da. This is a cashmere sock yarn. It's the first time I'm using anything. That's a lie. I've used other cashmere sock yarns, but it's going to be the first sweater with any sort of amount of cashmere in it. It only has 10%, but it does make the garment super soft, especially after blocking. So I think this is going to be a really awesome sweater to wear. My soft goal is to get it done for this Friday when you are seeing this video, because it is color day on Friday at work, and my house color is purple, and I just think it'd be really fun to show up to work wearing a me-made purple sweater. And it's really cute. There's like a cohort of like little grade 6s that come up to me every day I'm wearing something knitted and ask if I've made it. And they're also super excited to join my knitting club this upcoming winter. And so I think it'd be fun to wear on color day, and it's kind of like a good, relatively reasonable deadline. I don't know if I'll have it blocked by then, but I don't think anyone at work would know if I showed up to work with an unblocked sweater. They would probably just be in awe of my handmade purple house sweater that is going to be so soft. And when I say there's cashmere in it, it'll definitely get some jaw drops. There's 1x1 rib to finish it off. I didn't do a tubular cast off because the pattern just calls for a sewn bind off. And so as you can see here, it's nice and clean, but it doesn't have that little double knit edge that the tubular cast off has. The sweater also has a couple different options and modifications that you can make. I've chosen to go for the full length version because I want it to be a work appropriate sweater that I can wear with high-waisted or low-waisted pants. And the other option is that you can keep the neck high like a mock neck, or you can sew it down for a regular crew neck look. I'm going to opt for the sewn down crew neck look. I just think it's something that I tend to like to wear more often than the high neck mock neck. And so that's the option that I'm going for. But of course, you could do whichever one. And there's instructions for the cropped, the full length, the folded down collar, and the mock neck all in the same pattern, which is really awesome. I haven't alternated skeins in this, which you might be able to tell, but when I tried it on the other day, you definitely couldn't tell whatsoever where the line was. And I think the sleeves might do something a little different than the body just because of the smaller circumference. And so I don't know if you're really going to be able to tell at all whether or not I alternated skeins. And I think especially because it's a tonal and not a variegated hand-dyed yarn, it's a little more forgiving, where the variegated ones are less so. The other thing is that every single skein is from the same dye lot, where I've run into problems before using hand-dyed yarn for a garment, not alternating, but also using different dye lots, and you can definitely tell. But at the same time, I don't really care because it's a handmade sweater with hand-dyed yarn. It's about as handmade as you can get, unless you spin and dye your wool yourself. But this is my main work in progress right now, and it is the Chameleon sweater, and I'm so excited to get it off my needles and finally have this, like, it reminds me of like Purple Princess yarn out in the world as a finished garment. Before I get into my next work in progress, I wanted to talk about some jewelry I've been loving from Ana Luisa. And Ana Luisa kindly sent me a necklace back in the spring. They actually sent me 2, and I have worn this almost every single day for the past couple of months. Recently, they sent me some lovely earrings. I got this hoop pair as well as this pair with the little hearts. And the first day I wore the heart ones to school, my grade 8 girls were like, oh my gosh, those are so cute. And I was like, thank you. They're from Ana Luisa. These earrings here are the Julia Large, and they have been my go-to earrings every single day since I received them in the mail. I can sleep with them because they have a super easy closure to get on and off your ears. They are gold plated, which is awesome for all of our allergy girlies. And Ana Luisa also has a 2-year warranty. If you notice any tarnish or damage on them, they will replace it, no questions asked. This necklace is the Rowena necklace, and I have honestly worn it every day. I've worn it running, I've worn it swimming, I've worn it to the gym. It's just a great, simple, lightweight, versatile piece that honestly goes with everything, and pairing it with Julia earrings makes for a super cute matching set. Ana Luisa also has Black Friday deals where you can get exclusive discounts, and if you are interested in getting your own lovely jewelry pieces this upcoming holiday season, click on the link down below to get yourself some lovely jewelry that works with every knitwear piece. So on to my next work in progress. So this is the Simone Sweater Light by Stine Erikstad, which is an all over colorwork pattern. This is one that is for the Where We Knit along, which is really more of a make along. People have been crocheting and doing other fun fiber crafts for the knit along. The knit along is mostly over on Instagram, so if you haven't checked it out, I'd suggest going over so you can participate. This sweater is knit bottom up. You start off with some 2x2 rib, which I am the biggest fan of 2x2 rib right now. I just think it looks much neater than 1x1 rib, and I also find it more fun to knit. And then you go into some 2x2 color work where you alternate the main color of the bottom with your contrast color, and then about halfway through, well, it tells you how many rows to do, you switch from your bottom contrast color to your top contrast color. And in my case, my top contrast color is going to be this like bright blue, and this is inspired by a house here in Halifax. Again, the whole premise of the Where We Knit knit along is to knit where you live and to let your surroundings inspire your stitches. And this is the house that made me want to knit a sweater based on it because of the color composition and my preferred color palette. And I thought, why not share this idea with the rest of the knitting world, both here on YouTube and over on Instagram? And so I partnered up with Fia Fia, which is my local yarn store here in Halifax, where I kindly got the yarn sponsored. I'm using the Supreme Tweed by Myogarn. I'm holding this yarn double and working it up on a 5.5 millimeter needles for the colorwork section, and I'm using these 3 colors. Now the Supreme Tweed is a lightly spun yarn, and so you get a lot of meterage for a single 50-gram skein. Each 50-gram skein has 350 meters of yarn, which is awesome yardage. I'm using the colorway, let's see what this one is. This is the color Dove Blue, this is the color Pistachio, and this is the color Petrol Blue, and together they are going to look like the house that inspired this whole thing. I also asked one of my colleagues at work, who's a really wonderful photographer, if she could take some really cool finished object photos for me once this is done, and I can't wait to share those with you. But first I have to finish the sweater, and so the main project right now is my Chameleon sweater, and my Simone Sweater Light is actually going to go to the back burner as I get ready to try to pump out the rest of my gift knits that I need to make for this holiday season. But this is a sweater that I'm so excited to have in my wardrobe. I think it's going to be such a statement, bold sweater, and I just find that holding this double creates such a lightweight yet full fabric that it's just going to be really lovely to wear, and I'm excited to see how it turns up after blocking. I didn't do a gauge swatch for this sweater, which I know is not the best, but I find for sweaters with a lot of positive eaves, I tend to not swatch for them just because whether it's a little bit big or a little bit small, they all wind up around the same positive ease oversizedness, and I didn't swatch. So we are going for it and we are knitting it and we're going to see what happens. I could be biting my tongue once I post the podcast video where it is complete. I don't think I will be because I haven't bit my tongue for any projects recently and I haven't engaged swatch for that many unless they were a test knit. But this is my second big work in progress that I'm currently on. I do need to cast on my dad's Christmas sweater, which is going to be the main focus for a garment after I finish my Chameleon sweater. The last work in progress that I have is a mitten. This is a mitten that I randomly casted on for a concert that Holly and I went to. I just didn't have anything small and mindless and 100% stockinette to work on while we were at the concert. And we were there for quite a few hours. So it was like, this is gonna be a lot of knitting time, especially in the lulls and the lows and before the concert officially started when we were just like standing, waiting around. And so I cast this mitten on and I've really only worked on it at the concert, which I got done almost all of this, except for I did wind up splitting for the thumb after the concert. So this last little bit is what I did after, and I am just free knitting these mittens. They're lightly inspired by the arched gusset mittens because I have knit those in the past, but I'm not actually following that pattern and I'm using a fairly small needle. I think these are 2.5 or 3 millimeters just because they were, honestly, I opened my needle drawer and they were the first ones there. So I grabbed them and cast on 50 stitches and just started knitting a tube because I just needed something to work on for that night. And it wound up being a great circumference. And now I'm just working the top of the mitten. I've gone back and forth on whether to keep these fingerless or make them a full mitten. But I was at a brunch on the weekend and one of my friends there was like, are you really going to want to bike or wear them if they don't have a top? And I don't actually have a pair of mittens that I've made for myself. And so I think I'm going to make them regular style mittens and I'll knit a pair of fingerless ones at some later time. The other thing I'm worried about is running out of yarn. This is, I think this is Rowan felted tweed, or no, that's not felted tweed. It's a yarn by Rowan, but I threw out the ball tag, which is really silly of me, but it is a mix of wool and mohair. I'm totally blanking on it, but I got it from a yarn shop that was closing down for a super cheap price, and I just want to use it up. And so I do have another ball of these in a purple, but it's a dark purple. So if I run out of yarn, I'm probably just going to knit the top of the mitten in the dark purple and just see what happens. I don't really care that much. They're probably just going to be like running or dog walking mittens anyways. So I don't really need them to be perfect. I just wanted something really easy to work on. I actually do have a pair of mittens that I exclusively keep at work that I knit like 3 rounds on every one day in our 8-day cycle when I have an outdoor duty. And those will get shown when they are done, which they could be done fairly shortly because I'm almost done the increases for them. And I'm knitting those in brushed alpaca silk and supreme tweed in a gray color. So those could be finished relatively soon, but right now these are the mittens that I have and they're just like work a couple rounds on them here and there. I know that if I wanted to, I could focus and finish them in a single setting, but I've been really focused on knitting my garments and making plans and videos. So that's all that I really have for you today. I've gotten a few acquisitions, but I don't really want to talk about them until I start knitting with them. All of which have been sponsored and gifted to me. And so when I start working on the projects, you will see them. The only other notable acquisition that I got is a knitting book. And this is the Modern Danish Knitting by Spectacle Streak. I know I've heard mixed things about the level of hand-holding in Spectacle Streak's patterns, but I have knit a couple patterns from booklets and I've had good success with them. And The reason I got this is that there's 27 patterns in this book and it retails for $37 Canadian, which is just an incredibly good price per pattern when her patterns regularly retail for $14. This pattern that like triggered the purchase of this is the Bibby sweater. It's just this crazy all over Fair Isle colorwork pattern that is honestly like incredible. And I don't know, I've been really wanting to knit some colorwork. I debated about buying this pattern, and then I saw that it was included in this book and the pattern was $14. The other really cool notable pattern in this, so there's the Bibby sweater. There is the Mega Bibby slipover, which if you watched my winter knitting plans video, you'll know that that is a plan of mine to knit. There's also the Bibby scarf, and I think this would honestly be a lot of fun to knit, or to like hack it but make it a hat would also be kind of cute to knit. But the pattern that I think would be really cool to knit is, let me find it. There is a full sweater and pants set in here that I think would be really cute for lounging. And I think a pair of knit pants, if you did it in the right color, would be a really great workwear pant in the winter time. And so the crew pants, I know there's a pair of pants by Tuvo Sandok that have been really popular over on Instagram, but these pants are relatively similar. There's all over stockinette. There's a bit of ribbing at the bottom of the pant, but I think that they would be a really fun alternative to like some plain stockinette knitting to knit a pair of pants. I've knit shorts before and I really love them. These could also, I guess, be modified into shorts, but I want to knit the Tuvo pants or the Tuva pants, but because these were included in the book, I was like, hey, that's awesome. The other patterns I wanted to mention are that there are dog sweaters in this pattern book, which I just think is so stinking cute. And there's a striped dog sweater. There's also the fat fur sweater, which Tuva kind of went big a couple years ago. There was the popular fat fur hat where you get like a mohair brush and you brush out the mohair so it's like extra furry, and that pattern is also included in this book. So there was just a lot of staples as well as some specifics in this book that I thought would make a good addition to my knitting pattern book library. A good mix of lots of different modern styles. I can knit a sweater for Luna, and a good mix of accessories and garments. There's like skirts, there's dresses, there's vests, there's a little bit of everything in this book. So it seemed really versatile, and there was a good amount of staples in here, and I could justify the price of it. So this is the one acquisition I will talk about. The other ones are yarn that you'll see as I start knitting with them in the upcoming podcasted videos. So let me know what you were working on this video, and until next time, happy knitting. Goodbye.